Have you ever wondered what it would really feel like to live in ancient Egypt? Not as a pharaoh, not as a god, but as an ordinary person under that burning sun? Would you have survived the floods, the labor, the weight of eternity itself? Before we step back into that world, let me know in the comments, which ancient civilization do you think you'd actually survive a single day in? If stories like this help you drift off or just remind you how strange and beautiful our past was, make sure you're subscribed. Every week, we uncover another forgotten piece of history, slow, quiet, and alive again. Now, close your eyes if you want, and imagine the Nile beneath you, the desert rising beyond, and the sound of chisels carving forever. Let's begin. The sun has not yet risen, but Egypt is already awake. The air is still cool, the sand darkened by night, and a faint line of gold lies waiting beyond the horizon. You open your eyes to the sound of insects and the soft slap of water against the Nile's bank. This is your morning, 3,000 years before the modern world, and you are about to find out how much work it took to survive in the land of the pharaohs. You live in a small mud brick house, walls painted white to fight the sun. The roof is flat, made of reeds and clay, and you sleep on a mat woven from palm fiber. When you rise, there is no breakfast waiting on a polished table. Your meal is beer thick as porridge, made from half-fermented grain, and a small loaf of barley bread. It tastes sour and coarse, but it fills your stomach and keeps you standing. Most Egyptians never taste meat unless they work in the temples or the palace kitchens. The air smells of clay, fish, and smoke from hundreds of cooking fires. Down the narrow street, people are already shouting. A potter is firing his kiln. A woman kneels beside the water channel to wash clothes. Children chase each other barefoot in the dust, their laughter quick and high. The Nile is life itself here. It gives you water, fish, reeds for baskets, and the rich black mud that feeds your crops. But it also decides when you work and when you starve. If the river floods too low, the harvest fails. If it floods too high, it drowns the fields. You start your day early because the sun will soon become unbearable. The fields are already busy with farmers swinging wooden hoes and driving cattle through the mud to break the soil. Men sing to keep rhythm, voices rising like the river itself. They are not free peasants in the modern sense. Everything they grow belongs to the gods and to the pharaoh. They are laborious in the divine order, feeding the kingdom with sweat. In the distance, you can see the silhouette of a temple rising above the palm trees, white stone gleaming faintly in the dawn. That's where the real power lies. Priests in linen robes perform morning rituals long before you've finished your meal. They wash statues of gods, anoint them with oils, and burn incense so thick it makes the halls shimmer. You won't ever see those ceremonies. They happen behind closed doors, in the world of holiness and secrecy, far from the dust and noise of the fields. But today is different. You're not a farmer. You're part of a royal work crew building a tomb in the cliffs across the river. You were chosen because your father was a mason and his father before him. It's a privilege, in a way, a steady job, a ration from the state, even a place in a planned village. Yet it's also dangerous. You'll spend your life underground, carving walls that will never see sunlight again. The ferry across the Nile is crowded with men carrying tools and baskets of limestone chips. The water glows with the reflection of dawn. A priest on board sprinkles everyone with water and murmurs a short blessing. The superstition is old. If you die at work, you want your soul to find its way to the field of reeds, the Egyptian paradise. The gods, everyone agrees, can be sensitive about these things. You arrive at the western bank, where the land rises steep and barren. The cliffs look like broken teeth. In their shadow lies the Valley of the Kings, where the pharaoh's tomb is being dug by hand. You can hear the clinking of chisels echoing through the canyon, a rhythm that will continue day and night for years. The overseer, standing in the sunlight, reads out names and tasks from a papyrus scroll. You are assigned to a crew deep inside the new passage, smoothing walls for the artist who will later paint the journey of the king's soul. The work is hot, dark, and airless. The lamps burn animal fat and fill the tunnels with thick smoke. You take turns fanning the air with palm leaves, scraping stone, and brushing dust from the ceiling so it doesn't fall into your eyes. Every mark must be perfect. Every line is part of a spell that guides the pharaoh into eternity. A mistake is not just an error, it's a sin. The gods read these walls as maps. If a single symbol is wrong, the king might lose his way in the afterlife, and no one wants to be the worker who causes that. When you stop to drink water from a clay jar, it tastes warm and faintly of earth. Your back aches, your throat burns, and the light from the lamps turns the air into golden fog. Somewhere nearby, a scribe is recording the day's progress, marking who works, who rests, who complains. Even underground, bureaucracy never sleeps. The Egyptians invented paperwork long before they invented comfort. At midday, you climb back toward the surface. The sun is blinding, white and heavy. The foreman calls for a break, and the men gather in the shade of a cliff. Lunch is barley bread again, onions, and a little dried fish if you're lucky. Some chew on dates or figures. You share a laugh, trade gossip about the priests, and complain about the overseer's temper. One man claims he saw a ghost in the tunnel last night. Another says it was just a rat. Both might be right. Rest is short. The sun is still high when you return to work. Hours pass in the rhythm of stone and breath. Eventually the light outside begins to fade, and torches replace the sun. You can feel the temperature drop, but the rock still radiates the day's heat. The sound of hammers slows, then stops. The overseer dismisses you with a gesture, and the men step out into the open air, blinking like moles. The sky is purple now, streaked with gold. Smoke rises from the workers' village in thin threads. You cross back over the Nile, weary but alive. On the east bank, your family waits. Your wife is grinding grain with a stone quern. Your children chase each other through the dust, barefoot and loud. When they see you, they run, shouting your name. You smile despite yourself. Dinner is the same as breakfast: beer, bread, a few beans, maybe lentil stew if there's enough grain left. You sit on the floor with your family and eat with your hands. The conversation is small: news from the temple, a neighbor's sick goat, rumors of a festival next month. Afterward, you step outside. The moon has risen over the river, casting a silver road across the water. The night is quiet except for the croak of frogs and the distant call of a night bird. You think about the tomb you're building. It's meant to last forever, but you know forever is a word the desert doesn't respect. Sand will bury it, thieves will break it, time will forget it. Still, you keep carving. Not for the king, not even for the gods, but because building something that might outlast you is the closest thing you have to eternity. You lie down on your roof under the open sky. The stars are bright and endless. Somewhere beyond them, the pharaoh's spirit will soon travel, guided by the walls you've carved. You close your eyes, listening to the slow breath of the Nile. Tomorrow will come early again, and Egypt will go on, vast, eternal, and indifferent. The day begins again long before the light touches the horizon. You wake to the rustle of reeds and the sound of a donkey braying in the distance. The morning air carries the faint smell of wet clay and grain beer. There is no time to be lazy in Egypt. The Nile may be generous, but it is not patient. Every day missed is food lost, and food is the only real god anyone obeys. Before work, you make an offering at the small shrine by your door, a lump of bread and a smear of beer for the household spirits. You whisper a quick prayer to Toret, the hippo goddess of protection, and to Biz, the squat, bearded guardian of sleep and childbirth. The gods here aren't distant figures in the sky, they live in your walls, your jars, and your fears. You can't escape them, so you might as well feed them. The streets are already alive with sound. Chickens cluck from wicker cages, potters shout for water, and a woman scolds her son for losing the fishing net again. The smell of smoke and yeast fills the air. The baker's oven roars, blackening the sky just above the rooftops. People queue with baskets, waiting for their daily loaves. Bread is life here, wages, food, and offering all at once. The scribes record everything. They walk through the town with scrolls and ink palettes, checking who worked and who didn't, how much grain was delivered, how many jars of beer were consumed. Every life is measured in numbers written on papyrus that few will ever read again. The ancient Egyptians believed order kept chaos at bay, and bureaucracy was their favorite weapon. You don't complain. You sign with your mark and move on. As the day grows hotter, you make your way to the river. Women stand knee-deep in the shallows, washing clothes and laughing. The fishermen are already back with their catch, tilapia and catfish piled in woven baskets, the smell sharp and alive. Children chase frogs through the reeds, shrieking with delight. It looks like paradise, until you notice the blisters on everyone's hands, the calluses on their feet, the thinness of their arms. Paradise requires endurance. By midday, the temperature is unbearable. You wrap a linen cloth around your head and retreat into shade. The world hums with heat, even the insects sound tired. Somewhere upriver, drums begin to beat, a funeral procession, maybe, or a temple ceremony. The Egyptians hold festivals for everything: the birth of a god, the death of a god, the rising of the Nile, the harvest of grain. To live in Egypt is to live in rhythm with eternity. Every year repeats itself like the carvings on the temple walls. Later, you walk past the granaries, massive mud brick structures guarded by priests. Inside, men shovel grain into tall bins while others record the measurements on tablets. Nothing is wasted. Every kernel has a purpose: to feed workers, to pay taxes, to trade with foreign merchants who arrive with ships full of cedar, lapis, and incense. You pause to watch one of these ships unloading on the riverbank. Its sail is patched, its hull creaking, but its cargo smells of mountains and distant lands. For a moment, the world feels vast. In the evening, the city glows red as the sun sinks. The temple bells ring, calling priests to the evening rites. Smoke from incense curls into the sky like thin fingers. The people bow their heads briefly and continue walking. Faith is everywhere, but it's not dramatic, it's habit. You don't question it any more than you question the sunrise. When you return home, your wife is tending a small oil lamp. She smiles faintly and hands you a cup of beer. The children are already asleep, curled on the floor under thin linen sheets. The lamp flickers, painting soft light across the walls where you've drawn protective symbols in soot. Outside, the wind rises over the desert, carrying whispers through the cracks in the roof. You sit together in silence. The world feels both eternal and fragile, as though one wrong flood could erase everything you've built. You think of the pharaoh, his grand tomb, his divine name carved into stone, and wonder if he ever feels the same fear. Probably not. But then again, kings are just men who've learned to hide their trembling behind gold. The lamp burns lower. You stretch out on the roof again, staring at the stars that hang motionless above the Nile. You can almost imagine the souls of the dead sailing across them, guided by Ra's eternal boat. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of dust and sweat, eternity continues its slow, endless circle. You close your eyes and listen to the sound of the river breathing in the dark. Morning returns like a command, not a gift. The sound of sandals on packed dirt, donkeys snorting, water sloshing into clay jars. You open your eyes before the sun crests the horizon because that's what survival requires here. The gods may love order, but they don't make it easy. Today you're assigned to help in the temple workshops. The air there smells of beeswax, oil, and freshly cut cedar. This is where the statues of the gods are made, their eyes inlaid with lapis and obsidian, their bodies polished until they shimmer in lamplight. You're no artist, but you carry the wood, grind the pigments, fetch water for the sculptors. You've seen these statues carried through the streets on festival days, shimmering like living deities, and you know they will be worshipped as such for centuries. The irony doesn't escape you. Men make gods, and then the gods own the men. The master sculptor works in silence, his movements precise and almost reverent. When he carves the face of a god, he leaves the eyes for last. The moment he paints them, the figure is believed to awaken. It's a sacred transformation, and everyone steps back when it happens, afraid to breathe. You've watched this ritual before. The silence that follows feels like the pause between two heartbeats, brief, electric, and endless. Outside, the priests prepare offerings. The smell of burning incense rolls through the temple halls: myrrh, frankincense, cedar resin. The rhythmic chant of prayers echoes against the limestone walls, low and steady, like the pulse of Egypt itself. You stand in the doorway and listen, feeling the vibration in your bones. For all its strangeness, this world makes sense in its own way. Everything has a place, from the grain in the field to the soul in the afterlife. But it's not an easy place. You know of people who vanished into the desert for stealing from the temples. The punishment for theft is severe, but the hunger that drives it is worse. You've seen the famine years when the Nile failed to rise. The river is a god, but a moody one. When it forgets its duty, the land cracks open, and the people whisper of curses and demons. They pray louder then, but the gods rarely answer. At midday, a royal envoy arrives. The priests scramble to greet him, bowing low, their linen spotless despite the dust. He carries a message sealed in wax, a summons from the palace, perhaps, or a decree from the pharaoh himself. No one but the high priest is allowed to read it. You watch from the shadows as the letter is opened and the priest's expression changes. His lips press thin, his shoulders stiffen. Orders, always orders. By sunset, word spreads through the temple workers. A new tomb is to be built, larger than any before, carved deep into the western cliffs. You're to join the crew starting next week. The announcement feels heavy. You know what it means: years of darkness, chisels, dust, and silence. But also steady pay, rations, and perhaps, if the gods are kind, a bit of respect when your body grows too weak for labor. That night, the village hums with talk. The old men remember earlier projects, tombs that collapsed, others that were robbed, one that was cursed. You listen quietly, half skeptical, half afraid. Egypt runs on fear as much as on faith. The two are indistinguishable after a while. After the meal, you walk down to the river. The air is cool, the water black and gleaming under the moon. Across the current, the Theban hills look like sleeping beasts. Somewhere within them, future kings will rest, wrapped in linen and gold, surrounded by the prayers of people like you. It's an odd comfort, knowing you'll play your part in their eternity. You crouch at the edge of the Nile, dip your hands into the water, and watch the ripples fade. The stars shimmer on the surface, a mirror for the heavens. In Egypt, even the simplest act feels connected to eternity. Every breath you take has already been taken by countless others. You dry your hands on your tunic and turn back toward home, following the same dusty path that's been walked for 3,000 years. You'll walk it again tomorrow, and the next day, until the gods or the overseer decide you won't. Egypt is eternal, but its people live one day at a time. The following morning begins with the sound of temple drums. You can feel them more than hear them, deep and steady, like the heartbeat of the world. The sun rises in a pale haze, painting the mud brick walls gold. Women carry jars on their heads toward the river, men tighten ropes on carts piled high with grain. Life here is a cycle so ancient it's almost a religion of its own. Your path leads back toward the cliffs. The new tomb site has already turned into a small city of tents and scaffolds. Smoke from cooking fires rises in thin columns. The overseers bark orders while scribes record every chisel stroke on scrolls. The workers are divided into gangs: cutters, polishers, painters, plasterers. You know where you belong, and you join them without question. In Egypt, obedience is survival. The work is a kind of devotion. Every blow of the hammer, every carved line is an offering to eternity. You're told that the tomb will belong to a king whose name you're not allowed to say aloud yet. The secrecy is superstition and politics combined. Even the dead require security clearance. Inside the tunnel, the air is thick and still. You can hear water dripping from cracks in the rock. Torches throw moving shadows across the walls, making it look as if the gods themselves are watching you work. The ceiling is low enough to scrape your head if you're careless. You take small, steady swings with your chisel, carving a smooth surface for the painters who will come after. The rhythm is hypnotic. Time disappears. At the far end of the tunnel, an older worker coughs, wheezing in the dust. He's been at this trade longer than most of you have been alive. His hands tremble, but his lines are still perfect. He says nothing, just nods once when you glance his way. There's quiet respect in that gesture. No one in Egypt earns statues for digging eternity out of stone, but you can see in his eyes that he believes it matters. Maybe it does. When the foreman calls for a pause, you stumble outside into the light. The sun burns white against the cliffs. Sweat dries to salt on your skin. The air tastes of dust and copper. A small caravan passes by in the distance, traders heading north, their donkeys loaded with copper and incense. For a moment you imagine leaving with them, traveling beyond Egypt's borders, seeing mountains, forests, rain. But the thought fades. No one leaves. The desert holds tighter than any chain. The midday meal arrives in baskets carried by boys from the village. Bread, onions, salted fish, jars of beer. The workers gather in a semicircle, eating in silence. You watch a hawk circle high above, a speck of gold against the sky. The men murmur that it's Horus, the falcon god, watching over the pharaoh's resting place. You don't argue. Belief is the only shade you get out here. After the break, you'll move to the outer chamber, where artisans are sketching the first outlines of the wall scenes. Red ochre for guidelines, black for corrections. The images flow like poetry: Ra's sun boat, the weighing of the heart, the eternal fields of reeds. The artists don't just paint what they see, they paint what the soul must pass through. You catch yourself staring at one scene, a figure kneeling before Anubis. The god's jackal face is calm, almost kind. You wonder if he's kinder in art than in truth. When the workday ends, you can hardly feel your hands. The skin on your palms has split and bled, but you wrap it with linen and say nothing. Complaining doesn't fill your bowl. You cross the river again as the sun sets, the ferry creaking under the weight of the men. The Nile glows red, reflecting the sky like molten metal. On the far bank, the smell of cooking greets you: lentils, garlic, and fresh bread from the communal ovens. You eat slowly, savoring the quiet. The children play in the dust until the stars appear. Someone nearby starts to sing, a soft, repetitive melody about home, gods, and patience. The sound carries across the rooftops, thin but comforting. When you lie down that night, the sky above you looks endless. You trace the constellations the priests taught you about: Orion, which they call Osiris, and Sirius, the star that heralds the flood. You remember what the temple priests say every year: as the Nile rises, so too does the soul. You close your eyes and wonder if that's true, or just another promise meant to keep men working. Either way, you'll be rising before dawn again. Dawn slides in quiet as a secret. The horizon turns gold, and mist clings low over the river. You rise stiff, joints aching, and listen to the village breathe itself awake. The same sounds, the same smells: baked grain, wet clay, the faint sweetness of date palms. Egypt doesn't change much, and that's both its beauty and its curse. Today the foreman has a new task. The inner chamber of the tomb must be cleared for painting, which means hauling rubble out through narrow corridors already lined with carvings. The space is sacred now, or so the priests say, which means you work in silence. Every cough feels like a violation. You haul basket after basket of dust until your arms go numb. The torches hiss, throwing amber halos against the stone. When you stop to rest, a younger worker whispers that the king has fallen ill. Word spreads quickly, even in whispers. The pharaoh is supposed to be a god, immune to weakness, but rumor has no respect for divinity. Some say a curse from Nubia, others blame restless ancestors. You think of the frail old man entombed in gold and wonder if being divine ever stopped a fever. The work continues. The tomb must be ready, whether the king lives or dies. You pass by a team of painters working on the outer hall. Their hands move with divine patience, painting scenes of eternal harvests and floating souls. The pigments are ground minerals: malachite, ochre, lapis. They shine like sunlight on stone. You marvel at how calm they seem. Art here isn't decoration, it's instruction for the soul. The painters are writing a manual for resurrection. Outside, the sun climbs higher, baking the cliffs until they shimmer. The air vibrates with heat. A group of guards passes by on horseback, heading toward the ferry. They wear bronze helmets polished bright as mirrors. Power gleams even in the dust. One of them looks at your crew but doesn't stop. Labor is invisible to power, it always has been. The foreman calls a break. You find a patch of shade and sit beside an older mason who smells of sweat and resin. He offers you a drink from his jar. The water is warm, but you take it gladly. He tells you he's been building tombs for 30 years. He's buried 6 pharaohs, maybe more, and none of them came back to thank him. He laughs quietly, a dry sound. The gods forget their builders, he says. You both sit in silence after that. When you return to work, the corridor feels tighter, as if the mountain itself is closing in. You can hear the chisels echoing down the passage. Each strike is sharp, sure, endless. The tomb grows like a heartbeat under the desert. By evening, you've lost track of time. When you step outside, the sun is melting into the horizon, and the sky burns orange. The air cools, the wind picks up, and the Nile below looks like a band of bronze. You walk down the slope toward the ferry, feet dragging, tools slung over your shoulder. On the boat, the men talk softly. Someone mentions seeing strange lights near the tomb last night. Another swears he heard voices in the rock. You all laugh, but not too loudly. The gods are everywhere in Egypt. Sometimes you can feel them watching from the cracks in the stone. Back in the village, dinner waits, lentil stew thickened with onions, flatbread baked black at the edges. You eat sitting on the floor, shoulders brushing against others. The talk drifts to normal things: the coming flood, the price of beer, the promise of a festival if the king recovers. Someone mentions a rumor that the priests are planning a great offering to heal him: sacrifices, processions, the works. You hope it's true, not because you believe in magic, but because festivals mean music and extra rations. Later that night, you climb to your roof again. The stars burn cold and bright, and a faint wind blows from the desert. You think about the king, the tomb, the men working beside you. You think about your father and his father before him, all buried in the same dust. You wonder if anyone in the future will remember your name. Probably not. But maybe they'll see your work, a line, a curve, a stone, and know that someone once cared enough to make it perfect. The river murmurs in the dark. You close your eyes, and the world disappears into the same rhythm it always has: breath, water, stone, and silence. The season turns. The heat softens, the Nile begins to swell, and every heart in Egypt lifts with it. When the flood comes, it brings the black mud that feeds the crops, the scent of wet soil and promise. Priests declare it a holy renewal, the moment when life defeats death again. The people don't argue. They take their baskets and plows and follow the rhythm as they always have. From your roof you watch the river rise, slow and unstoppable. It swallows the banks, curls around the reeds, and climbs toward the houses like something alive. Boats drift past where roads once lay. The fields vanish under shining water, and for the first time in months, no one works the land. It is a strange, brief holiday written into the bones of the world. Festivals bloom across the country. The great temple at Karnak fills with chanting, drums, and perfume thick as smoke. Crowds gather in the heat to watch priests carry statues of the gods through the streets. The air thrums with devotion and the scent of roasted meat. Children run between stalls selling honey cakes and amulets shaped like scarabs. Somewhere a musician plucks at a lyre, notes floating above the noise like dragonflies. You stand among them, dizzy from the noise and the sun. The golden barge of Amun passes by, swaying on the shoulders of 100 men. The crowd throws flowers. Incense burns until your eyes water. You can almost believe, for a heartbeat, that the gods really walk among you. Maybe they do. The pharaoh himself appears on a platform, glittering in gold, flanked by guards. The people cheer until their voices crack. To them he's half human, half divine, a bridge between the Nile and the stars. You look at him and see a man in heavy robes, sweating beneath the sun, smiling because he must. When night comes, the festival doesn't stop. Torches light the streets, and the scent of wine replaces that of incense. You walk home under banners fluttering in the hot breeze, your ears still ringing with the sound of drums. In the distance, the temples glow like beacons, their walls alive with shadows. You know that tomorrow the work begins again, but for tonight Egypt feels alive in a way it rarely does. Morning brings the flood's second gift, stillness. The river covers the land in silence. Boats float between rooftops. The world smells of wet clay and fish. You and your neighbors repair nets, mend baskets, and wait for the water to sink. This is the time for stories. Families gather on rooftops and tell the old legends, of Osiris, slain and reborn, of Isis, who gathered his scattered pieces, of the serpent Apep, who tries each night to devour the sun. You've heard them since childhood, but they never lose their weight. Every Egyptian knows these tales better than his own bloodline. They're not stories. They're instructions for survival. When the flood finally recedes, the work in the tomb resumes. You return to the cliffs, where the air still smells of dust and sweat. Inside the tunnels, the artists are busy finishing the murals. The colors have deepened with age, each god and spirit given shape with meticulous care. You run your fingers lightly over the carvings as you pass, a habit, maybe a prayer. The scenes of the afterlife show endless fields, cool water, plenty of bread. You think it looks like paradise, except it also looks suspiciously like Egypt. One day, as you're hauling stones, a group of royal inspectors arrives. They wear linen finer than anything you've ever touched, and they carry tablets of ivory instead of wood. Their leader walks through the tomb, frowning at everything, leaving a trail of nervous silence behind him. You bow low when he passes. Men like him can decide your life with a word. They say they speak for the pharaoh, but it's hard not to think they speak mostly for themselves. That night, back in the village, the talk is uneasy. Rumors ripple like heat. The tomb's design may change, the king's illness has worsened, or the treasury is running dry. You don't know what's true, and it hardly matters. The only certainty in Egypt is work. Days blur into weeks, then months. The tomb grows deeper, more elaborate. Corridors twist like veins. Statues of gods guard every corner. The air smells of resin and limestone. Your hands are a map of scars now. Some nights, when the torches are low, you imagine the voices of the dead echoing faintly through the stone. You tell yourself it's just the wind. The king dies in midsummer. The news spreads quietly, carried by messengers wrapped in dust. There is no wailing in the streets, not yet. The priests will announce it at the right hour, under the right stars, when the omens are favorable. Death here is not an ending, it's logistics. You are summoned to the valley at dawn. The overseers move like ghosts, their faces drawn. Work must quicken now. The tomb is nearly done, but not complete, and eternity waits for no man, not even a god. New teams arrive from Thebes, carpenters, goldsmiths, perfumers. The silence of the valley is shattered by the sound of chisels, hammers, and chanting. The air smells of incense and sweat. Inside the burial chamber, the final touches are being made. You watch the painters finish the last hieroglyphs, steady hands working under flickering light. The priests murmur prayers to wake the magic hidden in the words. Each symbol is a spell, each figure a doorway. You've spent your life carving stone, but today, for the first time, you believe it might really speak. When the coffin arrives, wrapped in gold and linen, everyone stops working. It's carried by a line of priests, their faces hidden by masks of Anubis. The air thickens with myrrh and smoke. The high priest recites from a scroll while musicians play slow, aching notes on flutes. You step aside and bow your head as the coffin passes. You've seen death before, but never like this. It feels staged and real all at once, a ceremony meant as much for the living as for the dead. The burial takes days. Offerings are placed in every chamber, food, weapons, jewels, even board games for the afterlife. The work is moved carefully, reverently. When the final stone is set and the entrance sealed, there is no applause, no moment of pride. Just the echo of chisels fading into silence. You stand outside, staring at the cliffs glowing red in the sunset. Somewhere behind that wall of stone lies everything Egypt believes about eternity. You take a deep breath. The air tastes of dust and the end of things. The overseer dismisses you without ceremony. The work is done. You return home, but something feels different. The river looks the same, the village sounds the same, yet the world feels quieter. You've helped bury a god, and now the land itself seems to be holding its breath. Days later, life begins to move again. Farmers return to their fields, boats drift downriver, scribes tally their endless scrolls. The new pharaoh is crowned, and the cycle starts over. The tomb you built is already a secret, swallowed by sand and silence. You know that in time, it will be forgotten. All things are. But tonight, as you sit on your roof, the stars seem a little closer. The wind carries the faint scent of myrrh, and the Nile whispers below, eternal and unchanging. You wonder if the king has reached his paradise yet, the endless fields, the cool water, the rising sun. Maybe he has. Maybe not. But you know this much, Egypt will still be here when the rest of the world turns to dust. You stretch out on your mat and let your eyes close. The night is warm, the sky endless, and the gods, for once, are silent. The days that follow feel lighter, though nothing truly changes. Egypt never pauses for long. It flows like its river, endless and patient. The tomb behind you is sealed forever, but the living still need to eat, work, and bargain. The overseers find new projects, the scribes draft new decrees, and the people return to their routines as though the divine had not just been buried under the cliffs. You are sent to work near Thebes, helping restore one of the old temples that has begun to crumble. The river carries you there, winding like a green ribbon through the brown body of the desert. On the journey, you pass fields glittering with water, fishermen casting nets, and herders driving cattle along the banks. The Nile's voice is everywhere, a slow, sighing sound that's both comfort and warning. Everything Egypt has, it owes to that sound. The temple rises out of the dust like a memory. Columns carved with lotus and papyrus, walls still painted in fragments of red and blue. The statues of the gods have lost their noses, but not their gaze. When you walk inside, the air feels different, cooler, charged. You hear your own footsteps echo and realize that for the priests, this echo is the voice of eternity. You help repair carvings, smooth broken surfaces, and replace fallen stones. It's patient work, almost soothing. Each groove you trace feels like touching someone else's hand across centuries. You wonder who carved these walls first. Maybe someone like you, tired, sunburned, humming a work song under his breath. At noon, you rest in the shade beside the sacred lake behind the temple. Its surface mirrors the sky, perfectly still. The priests use this water for purification. You use it to wash the dust from your hands. It smells faintly of lotus and old offerings. The sound of chanting drifts from the inner court, a low drone that vibrates in your chest. You don't know the words, but you feel them. That's the strange thing about Egypt. Even when you stop believing, you can't quite stop belonging. In the evenings, you walk through the city streets of Thebes. They are wider than your village paths, busier too, markets spilling into alleys, children running between stalls, the air thick with the smell of dates, beer, and sweat. You see traders from Nubia, from Byblos, from lands you can't even name. Egypt is old, but it still hungers for the world's attention. One night, you pass a storyteller performing in the square. He stands on a small platform, gesturing with a stick, his voice rising and falling like a song. He tells of Set and Horus, brothers turned enemies, of betrayal and vengeance, of how even gods cannot escape jealousy. The crowd laughs and gasps, children wide-eyed, old women nodding. For a moment, you forget the dust and the labor. You are simply a listener, one more link in the endless chain of stories Egypt tells itself to stay alive. When you return home, the stars are out, and the city glows faintly from hundreds of oil lamps. You think about the tombs, the temples, the gods, the work. Everything you've done has been for someone else's eternity. But maybe that's the point. The priests say a person dies twice, once when their body fails, and again when their name is spoken for the last time. You whisper your own name softly into the night, half in prayer, half in defiance, as if daring the world to remember it. The wind answers with nothing but sand. You keep working for years. Seasons slide past in the rhythm of flood and harvest. The temple stands taller, its colors brightened, its gods reawakened. You grow older, slower, but your hands still know how to carve a straight line. When the younger workers ask how to make a cut clean or a joint fit, you teach them. They listen. Some will outlive you, just as you outlived those before you. That's Egypt too, the living becoming the past while pretending they're only working the present. One evening, the high priest invites the workers to watch a ceremony rarely seen by outsiders. The god statue is to be reclothed, stripped, washed, and dressed anew. The air inside the sanctuary is thick with incense. Priests move like shadows, chanting words older than the pyramids. When they unveil the statue, its gold gleams in the torchlight, and everyone kneels. You find yourself lowering your head, not out of fear, but out of habit. It's strange comfort, surrendering to the idea that someone, or something, is in charge of all this dust and time. When the ceremony ends, you walk outside into the dark courtyard. The night air feels alive. The stars seem brighter than ever. You realize that every god Egypt has ever worshipped, every king it's ever buried, all of it is part of the same story, one that refuses to end. And in that endlessness, you feel small but somehow safe. You make your way back to your home by the river. The air smells of water and silt. The Nile glimmers in the moonlight, the same way it did when you were young, the same way it always will. You lie down on the bank and close your eyes. The last thing you hear before sleep takes you is the sound of the current, whispering to itself as it flows toward forever. The years drift by quietly, the way sand drifts across stone. Your hair turns the color of the cliffs, your hands grow slower, but the rhythm of your days never truly changes. Egypt doesn't care much for youth or age. It only respects endurance. Your sons work now where you once did, hauling stone, carving, mixing plaster. They come home with the same dust in their hair, the same tired smiles. Sometimes you see your own reflection in their movements and feel a strange ache, something between pride and sorrow. The world hasn't moved forward, but it hasn't fallen apart either. In Egypt, that's a victory. One evening, when the river runs low and red with sunset, you sit beside your eldest son and watch the water twist around the rocks. He asks whether you ever wished for another life, one with comfort, rest, and no overseers shouting from the cliffs. You laugh softly. Every man in Egypt has wished that at least once. But then you shake your head. Comfort doesn't last, you tell him. Work does. He doesn't answer, but you see understanding flicker in his eyes. The next day, the temple bells sound again. A messenger has arrived from the palace, another death, another god-king passing into eternity. You don't bother to ask which one. Pharaohs come and go like the floods. The tombs remain. The priests will soon need masons again, and the old rhythm will start anew. You feel too tired to return to the valley, but you also know you will go when called. No one says no to eternity. That night, you dream of the tombs. You see the walls glowing with torchlight, the painted gods moving slowly in the flickering dark. You hear the chisels, the chanting, the faint sound of water dripping. Then silence, a silence so deep it feels like being inside the earth's heartbeat. When you wake, you realize it isn't fear you feel. It's peace. You've spent your life shaping stone for others, but in doing so, you've carved your own place into time. A season later, the priests call for workers to repair a collapsed tunnel near the royal necropolis. You volunteer, though your knees protest with every step. The valley is the same as always, dry wind, shimmering heat, the buzz of flies over the scent of resin and sweat. You greet a few familiar faces, men older than you thought possible. You share a jug of water, a few jokes, and then descend once more into the dark. Inside, the air is cool, still, and heavy. You light your torch and stare at the walls. The paintings are cracked but still beautiful, Ra's sun boat sailing through the night sky, Osiris welcoming souls into paradise, the eternal cycle of life and death. You trace a finger over one of the figures, and for a moment, it feels warm, as if alive. You spend the day reinforcing the walls, replacing stones, and sweeping away debris. It's hard work, but familiar. The rhythm returns easily, the sound of chisels, the flicker of lamps, the faint murmur of voices reciting old spells. You realize how much you've missed it. The tomb feels less like a workplace now and more like an old friend. When you step outside at sunset, the cliffs glow blood red, and the air tastes of heat and stone. You look down at the valley below, a labyrinth of tombs and paths winding through the desert. The sun sinks, and for a moment, the world turns gold. You stand there quietly, knowing this is the same light the kings once saw, the same sky they prayed to, the same wind that will one day scatter your dust. That night, you don't return to the village. You camp near the cliffs, wrapped in a thin linen cloth. The stars spill across the sky, vast and cold. You feel small beneath them but not forgotten. Somewhere out there, maybe beyond those same stars, is the field of reeds the priests always spoke of, endless harvests, cool water, and rest. You wonder if it's real, but you no longer need to know. You've lived as Egypt itself lives, building, enduring, fading, and rising again. When morning comes, you pack your tools slowly and begin the walk back to the river. The path winds through silence, broken only by the hiss of sand underfoot. Behind you, the tombs gleam faintly in the dawn. Ahead, the Nile waits, glimmering like a promise. You know, as every Egyptian has always known, that everything ends where the river begins. You reach the bank just as the sun lifts above the horizon. The light spills across the water, warm and blinding. You close your eyes and listen to the world breathe, the ripple of the current, the cry of distant birds, the heartbeat of a land that never truly dies. And for the first time, you feel eternal. Seasons pass, and the world tilts forward the way it always does, quietly, without asking permission. The river floods, retreats, floods again. Children become adults, adults turn to memory. The village grows a little, then shrinks when drought comes. Egypt doesn't change, it merely exhales and inhales through generations. You grow slower but not useless. The younger men ask for advice now: how to temper lime, how to judge the weight of a block, how to keep a line straight in dim light. You show them patiently. They joke that you've worked for every pharaoh since the first dynasty. You laugh and pretend to take offense, but secretly you like that they think you've always been here. It's almost true. One afternoon, while sitting by the river, a traveling merchant stops to rest beside you. His donkey chews reeds lazily as he opens a pack of strange goods: beads from Crete, oils from Byblos, a small bronze mirror from lands you've never heard of. He tells you stories of places beyond Egypt, of seas wider than any desert, of people who don't worship Ra or Osiris but gods with strange names. You listen in silence, half believing, half wondering whether these places could exist beyond the horizon. When he leaves, the air feels emptier. That night, the priests announce a new star has appeared in the sky. They say it's the soul of a great pharaoh ascending to join the gods. The people light lamps along the streets, and the reflection of fire dances in the river. You watch the sky until your neck aches. Maybe the priests are right, maybe not, but the light is there, steady and sharp, and that's enough. As the years turn, the world around you begins to feel different. Fewer workers are called to the tombs. Some temples fall quiet. The scribes still count and record, but their scrolls seem to hold less conviction. The gods are still worshipped, but the prayers sound thinner, as if the voices themselves are tired. Egypt has grown old, though no one will say it aloud. You spend your last working season helping restore a small shrine by the water's edge. The walls are faded, the roof cracked, but the carvings are still there, scenes of the sun's rebirth each dawn. You repair them as best you can, not for glory or pay but because you can't bear to leave them broken. When you're done, you step back and admire the work. It's simple, but it feels alive. For a moment, the sunlight hits the stone just right, and the painted figure of Ra seems to glow. You smile and decide that's good enough. Not long after, you fall ill. It starts as a cough, then fever, then weakness that seeps into your bones. The healers bring herbs and charms, the priest sprinkles water over your doorway. You thank them all and tell your family not to worry. It's only the body that grows old, you say. The rest keeps working. You mean it as comfort, though part of you wonders if it's true. One night, unable to sleep, you ask your son to carry you outside. The air is cool, the stars scattered thick across the black sky. You look at the river, at the faint line of temples beyond, and feel the same awe you did when you were young. Promise me, you tell him, when I'm gone, don't let the house fall to dust. Keep the roof swept, keep the hearth burning. As long as someone lives here, I'll never leave. He nods, eyes glistening, but you can tell he doesn't quite believe. That's all right. Faith always begins as imitation. The next morning, the family gathers. The priest hums a low prayer, the women sing a morning song that sounds older than language. You can feel your body loosening its hold, the world dimming at the edges. You think of the tombs, the stone, the endless rhythm of the chisels. You think of the flood, the festivals, the laughter of children in the dust. And you think of the Nile, patient, unstoppable, eternal. Your breath slows. The last sound you hear is the wind over the river. And then, silence. But the story doesn't end there. The years move forward. Dynasties fall, temples crumble, sands rise and bury everything you ever touched. Centuries pass in the blink of a god's eye. The Nile still flows, though the kings are gone. The tombs lie hidden, their colors waiting in the dark. One day, a stranger with pale skin and strange tools walks through the valley. He clears the sand, lights a torch, and steps inside a tomb untouched since your time. The air smells the same: dust, resin, the faint trace of eternity. He gasps when his light falls upon the walls, upon the colors you helped polish, upon the carvings you made with your own hands. Your work, forgotten for thousands of years, breathes again. He whispers words you don't understand, but the tone is reverent. He knows, even if he can't name you, that someone once cared enough to make this perfect. The walls speak again, the stories come back to life, and in that flicker of torchlight, you exist once more. The wind outside sighs through the cliffs, carrying the same eternal rhythm: sand, stone, and silence. The Nile gleams beyond, still whispering to itself under the same indifferent stars. Egypt endures. And so, in a way, do you. The strangers return again and again. They bring notebooks, lanterns, and languages you never learned. They measure, sketch, whisper, argue. They speak the word pharaoh as though it's an idea instead of a man. Some of them weep when they find the smallest thing, a bead, a broken comb, a line of paint that never faded. They think they're uncovering the dead. They don't realize they're waking them. The tomb breathes with their footsteps. Their light dances over the carved sun boats and jackal-headed gods, over the names of kings and builders. You'd laugh if you still could. These men think they've conquered time with ropes and brushes. But their wonder is honest, and so you forgive them. Even the gods like being remembered. The years stretch on. The sand no longer hides what it once swallowed. More strangers come, their tools sharper, their questions faster. They take what they call relics, hauling them across oceans to cities of glass and smoke. Your country becomes an idea again, a story told in dim museums where the air smells of varnish and foreign rain. People line up to stare at the coffin of a king, unaware that the true miracle was not the gold but the hands that carved it. Yet you're not angry. You find a kind of comfort in their awe. They speak of Egypt as though it were still alive, and maybe that's the point. The tombs were built to outlast flesh, and they have. The language may have changed, but the reverence hasn't. When they whisper your god's names, even clumsily, the old magic stirs. You feel it ripple through the stone. The promise of memory kept. Outside, the modern world grows noisy. Iron beasts move where camels once knelt, and lights burn brighter than any torch. But the Nile remains the same, dark and steady beneath the stars. The wind still tastes of dust and lotus. Farmers still cast their nets at dawn. Children still draw in the dirt. The shape of life doesn't change, only its costume. One night, a storm rolls over the valley. Rain, rare and wild, lashes the cliffs. For the first time in centuries, the desert smells alive. The water runs in tiny streams through the cracks, washing the dust from your walls. The paint gleams again, as if the gods themselves have leaned close to see their reflection. When the storm passes, the air is clear, sharp, endless. Somewhere, a bird calls, and the sound echoes down into the chambers like laughter. The next day, tourists arrive. They shuffle through the corridors, guided by ropes and signs. Their faces glow with curiosity, their voices hushed but restless. A little boy breaks from the group and touches the wall you once carved. His fingers trace the curve of a hieroglyph, clumsy and soft. His mother pulls him back, whispering not to touch, but you feel it anyway, the brief warmth of skin against stone. For a heartbeat, you're alive again. The guide tells them stories, of gods, of tombs, of curses. Some of it's true, some isn't. You don't mind. Stories are how Egypt breathes. They've kept it alive longer than any empire. The tourists file out, squinting against the sunlight, and the tomb falls silent again. But it's a good silence. The kind that hums with memory instead of absence. The centuries keep piling up. The world builds towers higher than any pyramid and calls them progress. But every now and then, someone looks back, toward the valley, the river, the painted ceilings. They feel the pull of something older than themselves, something that whispers that death isn't an ending, just another season. And somewhere beneath the sand, beneath the hum of engines and the glow of screens, Egypt dreams on. The walls you carved still stand. The words you helped shape still shine under weak electric bulbs. The faces of gods still watch with patient, unblinking eyes. The river still carries the scent of silt and forever. You have no name left for them to remember, but you have what no king ever fully earned, endurance. You outlasted their power, their crowns, their pride. The work you did for another man's eternity became your own. So the story settles at last, not with a scream or a song, but with the sound Egypt has always known best, the slow breath of wind through reeds, the quiet lap of water against stone, and the faint whisper of a language that refuses to die. At night the valley sleeps again, but it is not an empty sleep. Wind hums through the canyons, the same low voice that whispered to you when you still had lungs. It carries sand and memory in equal measure, piling both where it pleases. The moon slides across the cliffs and strikes the faces of the statues, and for a heartbeat, they look awake. In a museum far away, someone cleans the glass around a coffin. Tourists press their hands against it, eyes wide. The label says unknown artisan, New Kingdom period. They read it aloud, quietly. They don't know that the fingers that cut those lines bled, that the man who drew that curve once stood ankle deep in dust, blinking against smoke. They don't know your voice or your family's laughter or the songs you hum to keep rhythm. But they stare a little longer than they planned to, and that is enough. That is remembrance. The guide explains that Egyptians believed the heart would be weighed against a feather. If it was light, you entered paradise. If it was heavy, you were devoured. You wish you could tell him the truth, that it was never about judgment, it was about balance. Keep the world steady, keep the river flowing, keep the stone aligned. That was all any god ever wanted. The lights dim when the museum closes. The silence feels familiar. Somewhere, faintly, the building creaks, and it sounds like the groan of shifting rock. For an instant you could swear you hear water, smell resin, feel the press of cool stone. Eternity has a strange way of circling back. Back in Egypt, dawn slides down the cliffs again. The workers' village is long gone, but the foundations still hold their shape under the sand. Archaeologists dig there now, brushing carefully around fragments of pottery, tiny beads, a half-broken chisel. They label each find, photograph it, whisper over it as though it might wake. You almost pity them, so careful, so reverent, yet unaware they are walking through ghosts. One of them kneels and finds a piece of painted plaster no larger than a hand. Red, blue, and gold. The color is still alive. He wipes the dust away and grins, calling his colleagues. They crowd around, murmuring. You recognize the pattern. It was part of the ceiling you worked on your last year, a swirl of stars meant to guide the pharaoh's soul. You remember mixing that blue from crushed lapis. You remember thinking how it looked like the river at dusk. And now, centuries later, it shines again in someone else's palm. The fragment will be catalogued, shipped, displayed. People will file past it behind ropes. None of them will know your name, but every one of them will carry a little of your silence home. That is how memory works in Egypt, not loud, but persistent. It seeps through time like water through limestone, patient, unstoppable. The river keeps running. Farmers still plant along its edge. Children still skip stones where kings once sailed. The sun still burns, the sand still shifts, and the statues still watch. Civilizations rise and fall like tides, but Egypt remains the pause between heartbeats, ancient, unbothered, endlessly awake. If you could speak one more time, you wouldn't give a sermon or a secret. You would only tell them this, that eternity isn't gold, or tombs, or gods. It's the quiet endurance of those who built them, the ones whose sweat became mortar, whose small, perfect lines held the shape of heaven. The wind moves again through the valley, soft and endless. Dust drifts down into the open tombs, settling gently on the carvings, filling the spaces between words. The air smells of stone and warmth and something like memory. And then there is only the sound of the Nile far away, turning sunlight into shimmer, carrying the weight of 1,000 forgotten names toward the sea. Time stretches until it stops meaning anything. The desert measures life differently, not in years, but in layers of wind and silence. Above the valley, the cliffs crumble grain by grain, revealing and re-hiding what men once made. The tombs breathe in dust and exhale stillness. It's almost as if Egypt itself is dreaming, and the dream is long. Scholars from across the world arrive now in waves, notebooks under their arms, reverence in their eyes. They walk where you once worked, tracing your cuts, counting your strokes. They speak of dynasties and periods, of technique and pigment composition, as if understanding could replace presence. You don't resent them. They're doing what humans always do, rebuilding the past from shards, trying to convince themselves they belong to it. In the cool air of one excavation chamber, a young woman stands motionless before a wall of painted gods. Her flashlight trembles slightly in her hand. She isn't taking measurements, she's listening. You can tell by the stillness in her shoulders. She doesn't hear words, of course. No one ever does. But the silence has a texture, a pulse. For a moment, she looks up and whispers something, maybe a prayer, maybe thanks, and you feel the weight of centuries shift, just a little. Outside, the modern city buzzes. Cars honk. Vendors shout over radios. The river still moves between both worlds, past and present, myth and fact. Fishermen cast their nets at dawn, their boats small against the horizon. From a distance, it could be any century. The people who live along its banks don't think much about kings or tombs. They think about bread, weather, debt, family. But when they look at the cliffs, they still nod with respect. They know something vast happened there, something that made even stone remember. That's the quiet victory of your kind, the builders, the nameless. You gave the land its memory. Night falls, soft and unhurried. The air cools, the stars sharpen. Somewhere in the dark, a reed flute plays, a tune so simple it could belong to any age. Its notes drift over the water, weaving between ripples of moonlight. The same song might have been played when the tunes were new. The same rhythm might have echoed through your own village, back when your hands still bled from chisels. The melody doesn't change, only the players do. Down in the tomb, the air is perfectly still. No footsteps now, no tourists, no scholars. Just the faint hum of electricity from the lamps the caretakers forgot to turn off. The light washes over the painted ceiling, over the faces of gods who have waited patiently for millennia. Their colors glow faintly in the quiet, and you can almost hear them breathing. They are not lonely. They have eternity for company. If you listen long enough, you can hear the rhythm of the Nile above them, the eternal inhale and exhale of a land that refuses to stop living. That's Egypt's secret. Nothing here ever truly dies. It just waits for someone to notice it again. The camera of time pulls back, away from the tombs, the river, the city, until all that's left is the sound of wind over sand, the shimmer of light on water, and the echo of hands carving stone. Somewhere, the same sun rises. The same birds call over the same reeds. And the story, as always, begins again. Morning returns to Egypt as it always has, quiet, measured, eternal. The horizon turns gold, and the air thickens with light. Nothing about this place ever hurries, even the sunrise feels like it's remembering how to rise. The cliffs glow first, then the palms, then the river, slow and silver, curling through the valley like a thought that never ends. Farmers step into their fields again, just as you once did. The tools are newer now, metal instead of wood, engines instead of oxen. But the sound is the same, water, wind, breath. The language has changed, yet the rhythm of work hasn't. Egypt still builds and harvests, prays and bargains with the sun. People think history ended here, but really it just learned how to repeat gracefully. At midday, tourists stand at the edge of the Nile, shading their eyes against the glare. They take pictures of what they think is the past. What they don't realize is that they are standing inside it. The air carries fragments of every century, ash from the first fires, pollen from lotus that no longer bloom, whispers from stone that still remembers being carved. They look at the river and see beauty. You looked at it and saw survival. Both are true. In a small museum near Luxor, a guard dozes in his chair beside a glass case. Inside, fragments of painted plaster lie arranged like puzzle pieces. There's a note beneath them, ceiling, tomb of an unknown worker. The colors are still bright after 3,000 years, indigo, ochre, red. When the light shifts, it almost looks like the stars again. Visitors pass, murmuring softly, taking photos they'll never look at twice. But one child lingers. She presses her hand against the glass, watching the reflection of her face merge with the ancient colors. For a heartbeat, the past and the present touch, and the old magic breathes again. Outside, evening comes fast. The Nile catches the last light and turns it to fire. The call to prayer rises over the city, the same yearning that once built temples, now spoken to a different sky. The wind moves through the reeds, whispering the same syllables in every language. Life continues, reverent and ordinary. Somewhere beyond the noise, the valley waits. The tombs rest under a skin of sand, their walls asleep but never empty. Inside, the gods still watch with patient eyes. The air still hums with the dust of old prayers. A single grain of pigment, once held in your trembling hand, clings stubbornly to stone. It has outlived everything that named it. If there is an afterlife, and by now you suspect there is, it probably looks a lot like this. Light on water, wind through reeds, hands still building, heart still remembering. Eternity, it turns out, is not endless silence but endless repetition. The same work, the same sunrise, the same awe, again and again, until the world learns to listen properly. The stars come out one by one, scattering like seeds. The wind grows softer. The river sighs. In that long, slow breath, the story of Egypt folds itself back into the dark, content, unfinished, eternal. Night stretches wide over the valley, deep enough to swallow centuries. The air cools until it smells faintly of stone and water, the two things Egypt has always been made of. The last boat slips down the Nile, its lantern a floating ember, the same way they once carried torches during the burial of kings. The sound of the oars is rhythmic, unhurried, like a heartbeat from the world's beginning. The cliffs are quiet, but not dead. Every grain of sand carries sound, the footsteps of workers long vanished, the crack of chisels, the low chant of priests echoing from beneath the rock. Even the wind seems to remember its role, moving carefully, so it won't wake the gods. Far below, in a chamber hidden from everything except time, dust floats lazily through the beam of a single light. It lands on the shoulder of a painted god, on a face you once smoothed, on the same curve that 1,000 tourists have photographed and never understood. The colors are old now, cracked but breathing. The story they tell is the same one they told when your hands were young, that life bends, but never breaks. That death is an instruction, not a punishment. Above the cliffs, the desert rolls outward in every direction. There are no borders, no names, no sounds, only the pulse of heat still rising from the day. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of light, a jackal cries. Anubis hasn't gone anywhere, he just learned to keep quiet. And then, almost imperceptibly, the eastern horizon begins to glow. It's the same color it's always been, the color of gold diluted with dust. The first bird calls. The wind stirs. A thin ribbon of light slips down the cliff face, catching the edge of a broken statue. For a moment, the god's mouth seems to smile. Morning comes again. The river gleams, the fishermen begin their day, and the land exhales. It's been doing this for 5,000 years. It will keep doing it for 5,000 more. The tombs will wait. The walls will hold. The words carved for eternity will continue to whisper to the dust. That's the thing no empire ever understood, that immortality doesn't belong to kings. It belongs to the builders, to the hands that cut and shaped and carried, to the people who never signed their names but built the letters others worshipped. You were one of them. You still are. Every sound, every color, every curve of the river carries your fingerprint, invisible but permanent. The world above changes its clothes and calls it progress. The world below simply endures. The Nile flows on, still carrying light through the spine of a land that refuses to die. And as the first heat of morning spreads over the cliffs, somewhere deep in the quiet stone, a single echo remains, the memory of hands at work, and the sound of breath turning dust into meaning. That is Egypt's heartbeat, and it never stops. The light swells, spilling over the water like molten glass. A heron lifts from the reeds, slow and deliberate, its wings brushing the morning air with the same elegance the artisans once gave to the gods. The fishermen call to one another, their voices faint and timeless. Nothing in Egypt truly begins or ends, it just folds into itself, a ribbon of work and rest, birth and burial. By mid-morning, the air hums with heat again. Market stalls open along the riverbank, vendors stack fruit into pyramids that look like jokes whispered to history. The smell of baking bread drifts through the streets. Coins clink, camels groan, a child laughs. If someone from your time could stand here, they'd recognize everything but the words. Even the rhythm of the day feels familiar, as though it's been rehearsed since the first sunrise. Up in the hills, a tall bus wins its way toward the valley. Its passengers fan themselves, staring at the cliffs through tinted windows, unaware that beneath them lie miles of painted corridors still breathing the same stale air you once breathed. When they step out, the heat hits like a wall. Cameras click, hats tilt, shoes crunch on gravel. The guide begins to speak, practiced and patient, his voice echoing against the rock. These tombs were built to last forever. He's right, though maybe not in the way he means. Forever was never about gold or walls. It was about persistence, the refusal to let silence win. The tourists listen, nodding, squinting against the sun, trying to imagine a world where sweat was prayer and stone was faith. You wonder if they can feel it, the hum beneath their feet. The old rhythm. By afternoon the light turns white and heavy, and the cliffs begin to shimmer. The crowd moves toward the shade, their laughter fading behind them. The valley returns to quiet, its sound swallowed by heat. Somewhere deep inside, a small stone shifts, falls, lands softly on sand that hasn't seen daylight in thousands of years. The echo travels through the tunnels like a sigh. Down by the river, the sun begins to fall. Shadows stretch long across the fields, the air cools, turning the color of copper. A farmer rinses his tools and stands still for a moment, watching the water darken. He doesn't know he's standing on the same bank where pharaohs once launched their funerary barges, or that his simple breath mirrors the rhythm of 1,000 prayers. He only knows the river, the soil, the work. But that's enough. It always has been. As night comes, the stars return, those same patient stars that once watched the building of pyramids, that still trace their paths over the sleeping desert. Somewhere beneath them, your work still glows faintly in the dark, a language carved in devotion. The gods are quieter now, but the world they ruled hasn't gone anywhere. It just learned to whisper. The wind moves through the valley once more, stirring the sand, brushing the carved faces with a touch that feels almost kind. The river answers, steady and low. And for one more endless night, Egypt breathes. The moon climbs over the valley and paints the desert silver. The cliffs look softer under its light, the carvings gentler, the sharp edges of stone blurred into calm. The air is so still you can hear the Nile breathe, the slow pull of current against reeds, the faint rustle of papyrus brushing the banks. It's the same sound you heard when you were alive, the same sound your children heard, the same sound that will still be there when no one remembers your name. Far away, in Cairo's glow, the city hums with electric life. The noise of cars, of music, of human impatience drowns out the silence that built the world. Yet, even there, somewhere deep in its rhythm, Egypt remains. A taxi driver hums an old tune without knowing it was first played on a reed flute 5,000 years ago. A woman lights a candle for her ancestors, and the flame flickers the same way it once did before statues of the gods. Time doesn't erase, it rearranges. Back in the valley, the archaeologists have gone for the night. The tomb doors are closed, sealed again not by stone but by locks and keys. Still, the dust moves. The air stirs. The painted gods watch in patient silence. Somewhere in the dark, a single grain of sand slips down a wall, landing on the floor like a heartbeat. If anyone could listen closely enough, they'd hear the sound of history breathing, slow, steady, endless. The carvings don't need voices. They already speak in color, in line, in presence. Every pigment you once mixed, every curve you once traced, still carries the warmth of your hands. The walls remember the pressure of your palm, the rhythm of your work, the patience it took to make something that would outlast you. Above ground, the desert begins to cool. The stars spill over the horizon, thick and bright. For every one that fades, another is born. Somewhere beyond them, the gods are still sailing their sun boats, still keeping watch, still arguing over who will rule tomorrow's dawn. You wonder if they've learned anything. Probably not. But they still rise, and that's enough. At the riverbank, the water catches the moonlight and throws it back toward the cliffs, a silver thread tying the present to the past. The reeds sway as the wind passes through, and their whisper sounds like language again, soft, rhythmic, older than any script. And if you listen to that sound, really listen, you can almost hear the shape of the world as it was when you first opened your eyes: stone, water, heat, breath. The 4 pillars of Egypt. They've held everything up this long. They'll hold everything long after the last word is spoken. When morning comes, the sun will return like a memory, and the river will start its day again. Boats will glide over it, birds will rise from it, and the valley will wait in silence. It always waits. That's what eternity is, not endless life, but endless patience. The gods have gone quiet, the kings have turned to dust, and still the river moves. Still the carvings gleam. Still the air hums with the echo of your work. You were a builder of stone, but what you made was time itself. And time, for once, kept its promise. By dawn, the horizon softens from black to amber, and the cliffs come alive again, each ridge catching light like breath. The wind rolls gently down the valley, carrying the scent of river silt and acacia. From above, the tombs look like scattered doorways waiting for their owners to return. Fishermen step into their boats, their shadows bending over the surface of the water. Nets unfurl like silk. A call, an answer, the same words spoken by generations who never met each other yet worked in perfect rhythm. A boy helps his father pull the rope, muscles straining, laughter breaking the stillness. He doesn't know that his face looks exactly like those painted on the walls you carved, his movements echoing figures drawn thousands of years ago. The past has disguised itself as the present. In the nearby city, morning prayers rise from the rooftops. The sound flows outward, mingling with the cry of birds and the low rumble of distant markets. The same hunger that once built pyramids now builds apartment blocks. The same faith that buried kings now holds together ordinary lives. Nothing has been lost, it's just wearing a different name. In the museums, caretakers sweep dust from the glass cases. They straighten labels, polish lights, hum softly to themselves. The colors of Egypt gleam under sterile bulbs, still bold enough to challenge the centuries. Visitors arrive with tired feet and quiet awe. They look up at the painted ceilings, the scrolls, the sarcophagi, and whisper to each other, unsure why they feel reverent. It's because they've walked into a memory that refuses to fade. Meanwhile, the valley waits. The sand shifts just enough to reveal a corner of stone, a hint of a stairway. Someone will find it soon. They'll dig, they'll brush, they'll whisper the word discovery as if it belongs to them. You'd smile at that, at how humans always think they're uncovering something new when they're really just coming home. The day grows hotter. The river turns white with glare. The air smells of metal and salt. A hawk circles above the cliffs, steady, patient. You used to believe it was a god keeping watch. Maybe it still is. Maybe the gods never left at all, they simply learned to hide in the ordinary. In the curve of a pot, in the hum of a fisherman's song, in the slow rhythm of oars against water. At noon, the heat swells until the world wavers. Mirages shimmer across the desert. The tourists retreat to their buses. The locals retreat to shade. The cliffs remain, unmoved, their faces scarred but proud. You know every crack in them, you helped shape some. You left pieces of yourself there, a breath in the dust, a print in the plaster, a mistake no one ever noticed. Small things that became part of forever. When the sun begins to sink, the air cools, and the world exhales. The colors of the desert change from gold to rose to indigo. Lamps flicker to life along the riverbank, and laughter drifts from the cafes that line the water. People eat, talk, argue, fall in love, all under the same sky that watched you carve stone by torchlight. Night will come again, and the valley will close its eyes. The wind will sing through the tombs, the sand will shift, and the stars will trace the same paths they always have. The gods will stay silent, the river will keep moving, and Egypt will remain, ancient, tired, alive. And somewhere, deep in the heart of all that silence, your work will still glow beneath a layer of dust. Not loudly, not proudly, just steadily, like the last ember of a fire that never really went out. The evening deepens, warm and heavy, and the horizon folds into shadow. The last light catches the tips of the palms and turns the Nile into a mirror, gold melting into black. The day's noise fades one sound at a time, the splash of oars, the hum of traders closing stalls, the laughter of children skipping stones. What's left is the low thrum of insects and the whisper of the wind sliding down the cliffs. Somewhere in Luxor, a train passes, its horn long and mournful. It cuts through the air like a reminder that the world above never stops moving. But out here, among the tombs and the dunes, time keeps its own slower rhythm. The land doesn't hurry to remember or to forget. It simply waits, patient as the gods that shaped it. In the valley, the stars come alive again, brighter than any lamp. You can trace the same constellations carved into ceilings 3,000 years ago: Orion, which the priests called Osiris; Sirius, the herald of the floods. The same stories told by torches now hang in the open sky, unchanged. Even eternity has good habits. The tomb entrances glimmer faintly under the moon. Sand shifts against their sealed doors like breathing. Inside, the air remains still, thick with the smell of resin and ancient wood. Every painted wall holds the echo of a hand. You can almost see it, a mason leaning in, squinting by torchlight, sweat dripping into dust. He hums to himself, the same tune his father taught him, steadying his heartbeat as he works. That sound never really left. It just became part of the stone. Across the river, in the modern city, electric lights flicker to life. The glow spreads like a second sunrise. Cars hiss by on asphalt, a vendor calls out over the noise, a group of teenagers laugh near the water's edge. If you listened only to the rhythm, the heartbeat beneath the sound, it would feel the same as it always did. Egypt still hums, still breathes, still remembers how to be endless. In a small apartment, an old man sits by his window, smoking, watching the river. On the wall behind him hangs a cheap print of a tomb painting, one of yours, though he doesn't know it. He looks at it sometimes when the air feels too still, when the power flickers and the night gets too loud. He says it calms him, though he couldn't explain why. Maybe something in those lines, those colors, still carries the quiet you left behind. Farther south, children run along the water, their laughter carrying into the dark. They throw stones and count the ripples, the same game played by every generation since the first village stood here. Their voices echo against the cliffs, faint but bright, bouncing through the valley like a prayer without words. The sound reaches the tomb walls and fades into them, another layer of memory pressed into stone. And when the night finally grows quiet, when the air cools and even the river slows, Egypt does what it's always done best: it listens. To the wind, to the sand, to the ghosts who never learned how to stop building. The gods are gone. The kings are dust. The people have changed their names and their gods and their languages 100 times over. But the land? The land still knows the script. It still remembers the feel of hands shaping it. So the wind moves again, tracing the curve of the cliffs, carrying the scent of silt and incense. It hums softly, almost a song, and if you close your eyes, you can imagine it saying what Egypt has whispered since the first dawn. I remain. The moon slides lower, and the world turns silver and quiet. The Nile glows like a line of polished metal, soft ripples catching starlight. The desert holds its breath. Even the wind pauses, as if it's tired of repeating the same lullaby for 5,000 years. Somewhere in the darkness, a fox pads between stones. Its eyes flash in the faint light, quick and cautious. It stops at the edge of an ancient path, one your feet once knew, and listens. The silence is so complete it hums. Then it moves on, vanishing into shadow. Egypt has always belonged to creatures that travel lightly through time. In the valley, the tombs sleep beneath their blankets of sand. The doors are closed, but inside the air is dense with centuries. Dust drifts like memory, settling on the shoulders of painted gods who never blink. The colors have dulled, but the meaning hasn't. Every line still says the same thing: we were here. We made this. We believed it mattered. Far above, dawn stirs again, that slow gold tide that never forgets its cue. The first light touches the horizon, then spreads across the cliffs like a hand. You'd think it would feel new each morning, but it doesn't. It feels remembered, the same ritual between earth and sky that started before language and never stopped. In a nearby village, roosters begin to call. A woman wakes and sweeps dust from her doorstep. Children chase each other through narrow alleys, kicking up clouds that smell faintly of old stone. Their laughter rises, high and bright, echoing against walls built from the same mud their ancestors used. They're not thinking about pharaohs or gods or eternity. They're just alive. But that's the miracle. Life itself has become the afterlife. The ferryman pushes off from the shore, his oar dipping into the water with a sound that's been identical for millennia. Ripples spread outward, catching the reflection of the cliffs. On their surface, the ancient and the modern touch, temples and houses, sandals and shoes, prayers in 100 tongues. The river doesn't care which century it's carrying. It just flows, loyal to gravity and memory. When the sun finally clears the horizon, the color returns: gold, rose, white. The carvings hidden in the tombs catch the warmth even through layers of sand. For a few minutes, the paint glows again, faint and fragile but alive. The gods are backlit by morning, their faces patient, unbothered. They've waited too long to rush now. Above them, the wind wakes up again. It brushes the cliffs, stirring the sand, smoothing away footprints left by yesterday's visitors. It's gentle work, erasing without destroying. The desert doesn't resent being walked on, it just likes to start fresh. And so another day begins in a land that's already lived more of them than anyone else ever will. Boats cross the river. Smoke rises from kitchens. A child skips a stone and watches it bounce 3 times before sinking. The ripples spread, touch the shore, fade. The same pattern repeats, in water, in history, in memory. If you stood there now, you'd know it instantly. This is what eternity looks like. Not endless gold or perfect silence, but the quiet continuation of ordinary moments, each one echoing the last. The sun climbs higher. The cliffs shine white again. And beneath them, in the cool breath of stone and shadow, Egypt continues to dream, unending, patient, awake. By midday, the light hardens, washing the desert clean. The cliffs burn white, and the air above them ripples like glass. The river narrows into glare, and the wind slips away to hide until dusk. Egypt at noon is not gentle, it tests the living the same way it tested the builders. Even the shadows look tired. In the old quarter of Thebes, life still stirs in slow motion. Market stalls droop beneath the heat, their tops fluttering like tired lungs. The smell of dust and spice fills every corner. A merchant pours water over the floor to keep it cool, and the steam rises like incense. Behind him, a radio hums, a voice reading poetry in Arabic, ancient rhythms disguised as modern verse. People think they've forgotten the old language, but it still hides inside the new one, like roots under sand. At the museum nearby, the crowd thickens. Cameras click, flashes burst like small storms. A tour guide gestures toward a gilded mask, her words looping into the air with the cadence of a hymn. He was buried with everything he might need in the afterlife, she says. Bread, beer, jewels, chariots. The listeners nod, fascinated, their reflections flickering across the glass. None of them notice the small crack in the display case, a thin, perfect line that catches the light like a scar. It looks almost alive. Outside, a boy sells postcards. He doesn't know who's on them, kings, gods, maybe both, but he calls out their names anyway. Tutankhamun, Ramses, Isis. The words echo against the walls, names that have crossed millennia and still hold their power. When his pockets are full of coins, he runs to the river to cool his feet. He laughs when the mud sucks at his heels. He doesn't know he's standing where priests once launched funerary boats, their chants carried on the same wind that now touzles his hair. Upstream, the farmers take their lunch under acacia trees. Bread, cheese, water. The same meal their ancestors packed before hauling stones. One man wipes sweat from his brow and stares toward the horizon. The pyramids aren't visible from here, but he looks as if he can see them anyway. He chews slowly, eyes fixed on something older than memory. By afternoon, the light begins to tilt, and the heat breaks. The air fills with movement again, voices, footsteps, birds. In the distance, someone plays a flute. The sound floats over the water, fragile but steady, a thread tying everything together. The same tune could have been played when the gods still walked in gold, when the first worker carved the first line into the first block of limestone. It's not nostalgia, it's continuity. The sun lowers itself over the cliffs, setting them on fire. The tombs beneath remain in shadow, patient, untouched. Every layer of the earth above them glows, sand, stone, air. For a few minutes, the world looks transparent. You can almost see how it all connects, the sweat of the living feeding the silence of the dead, the prayers of the poor keeping the gods awake, the river stitching the centuries together. As twilight deepens, the color fades from everything except the sky. The stars sharpen, the river turns black, and the first night breeze drifts through the reeds. It smells of wet earth and time. A farmer's lantern flickers by the bank, and for a second, it looks exactly like the lamps once carried into tombs for eternity. And then, as the first full darkness settles, Egypt exhales, long, slow, unbroken. The noise of the day dissolves, leaving only the hum of the river, the whisper of sand sliding down stone, and the memory of hands shaping forever. The cliffs wait for morning. The gods keep their silence. And the story continues, somewhere between breath and dust, as it always has. Night returns, soundless and infinite. The cliffs lose their edges and sink into shadow. The Nile becomes a ribbon of glass again, and the stars lean close, reflected in its dark surface. For a while there's no horizon, no separation between sky and earth, just one endless body of light. Somewhere far upstream, a heron calls. Its cry fades into the wind and disappears. The air smells faintly of silt, resin, and smoke, the perfume of a land that never learned how to die. The valley lies quiet. The tombs beneath the sand hold their breath. You can almost hear them listening, not for prayers or footsteps, but for the sound of the river. That low, eternal current has become the heartbeat of the world. It seeps through cracks in stone, wins through empty corridors, hums inside every grain of dust. The gods may have left, but the rhythm stayed. The stars drift slowly westward, the same direction the pharaohs once sailed to meet the afterlife. The constellations tilt, their patterns older than every word ever carved into stone. They're still bright enough to read by, if you know the stories. You remember some of them, of gods who fought, died, returned, of kings who demanded eternity and almost got it, of builders who gave their lives to make sure eternity had walls to stand in. You were one of them. You still are. The wind moves over the river again, soft as breath. It brushes through the reeds, through the empty halls, through the open mouths of statues that still whisper names no one speaks aloud anymore. It carries dust from the tombs and lays it gently over the fields, the roofs, the boats. Every dawn begins in that dust. In the east, a faint light blooms. The sky turns from black to indigo, then to the same soft gold that's risen over Egypt since the first morning. The river answers with a shimmer. The cliffs wake slowly, stretching their long shadows over the plain. Another day begins, indistinguishable from the thousand that came before it, and that's the beauty of it. The repetition is the prayer. Somewhere, a fisherman calls to his son. A rooster cries. A woman opens her door and sweeps sand from her threshold. The simple, ordinary motions of life return, small, perfect acts of endurance. They don't need gods or kings to make them holy. They make themselves eternal simply by happening again. The light grows stronger. The valley warms. The world stirs. You can almost feel the pulse of it, deep, patient, alive. And as the day takes its first full breath, the river speaks its single, endless truth, that nothing here ever really ends. The sand buries, the wind uncovers, the water remembers. The work continues. The story continues. The builders are gone, but their hands still guide the light. The sun clears the horizon, and Egypt wakes again, golden, unbroken, eternal.